Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hello. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello.
So we have about 80 plus people who have RSVP today. So we're just going to give it another 30 seconds or so to let a few more people flow in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. So Joe, you can go ahead and turn off the music. And let's go. All right. So welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you here today. As I mentioned just a moment ago, we have quite a few people registered for today's session on creating community newsletters. About 80 plus, probably closer to 90.
95.
Yeah, 95. And I think hopefully at least half of them will come today. I know some folks want the recording. And speaking of, there will be a recording. So I'm Stephanie Murray. I'm from the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University. And we are really excited to host this session today. We initially worked with a friend of the center, Simon Galperin, who runs the Bloomfield Information Project, to show how he's doing this concept that he calls a news harvest to help create a community focused and really a community led newsletter to help benefit New Jersey news organizations. But as I mentioned, we have a lot of people signed up from all across the country. So we're really glad to have you all here today. As I mentioned a moment ago, we are recording this session. We know some folks who signed up wanted the recording and aren't able to be here. So we will distribute that after the event today. We'll also be using the chat pretty frequently. Hopefully most folks who are here are familiar with Zoom. If you're not, click the chat box below. You can drop any questions, anything you want to know, links, etc. Down there. Today's session will be somewhat informal. Simon's going to give a presentation, and then we're going to move into Q&A. So anything that you want to ask, again, you can drop it in the chat, but we'll also have plenty of time after Simon speaks for you to unmute yourself and ask your question and learn together. So with that, Simon, you good? I'll hand it over.
Hi, y'all. Testing my volume to make sure everyone can hear me. Really great to be here. Thank you so much to the Center for Cooperative Media for putting this together. And I'm thankful to see so many familiar faces that maybe one day I'll get to see in person one day too. So I'm just gonna get right into it. We have some slides I'm gonna share once I get my screen share going. So for those who don't know, my name is Simon Galperin. Obviously, I'm the founding director of the Community Info Co-op. We're an organization dedicated to developing new ways for public funding and participation in local news, media, and technology. We run the Bloomfield Information Project, as Stephanie mentioned, in Bloomfield, New Jersey, which is our public service journalism lab, where we're taking our lofty vision for a new direct service model for local news and putting it into practice. What that means is that we're developing workflows, products, and services to help make Bloomfield more informed, engaged, and resilient. We think local news can build connectivity within the community and make it stronger. And based on what the future we're looking at, I think these sorts of workflows and these sorts of new models for local news are going to play a really important role in keeping people as healthy and happy as they can be. One of the things that we are developing is the News Harvest, which is why y'all here. It's this idea for taking news and information from one place and redistributing to people who need it, knowing that a lot of the distribution mechanisms that we rely on aren't actually going to be able to always meet people's needs. Stuff like Facebook, Instagram, etc. We want to make sure that some information reaches people, so let's come up with ways to do that. In order to talk about this a little more, I want to introduce this concept of a last mile problem. It's something we're familiar with in supply chains. It's when like the final delivery of that thing becomes a little costly and a little inefficient. We can see examples of this across sort of society and culture, broadband access, food access, banking, and increasingly local news. This question was actually brought to us by a community member at one of our initial listening forums, where they said that news and information in town is pieces here and pieces there with no single reliable source. And I think that that's largely true for a lot of communities, even if they do have local news organizations, because a lot of stuff just kind of like floats into the ether when it gets posted on Facebook or shared elsewhere. And being able to capture that and doing something with it, making sure that access is equitable to to the lifeblood of community, right? To local news and information. There are opportunities for us to consider how to make that happen. So the way we do that is by looking at other people who are solving these last mile problems. Increasingly, we worked with local food banks on information and mask distribution in our community. We're on track to distribute 2,400 reusable cloth face masks to people in partnership with food banks and the health department and Salvation Army. So what they do when they have an access problem or a last mile problem is they literally go pick up the food from somewhere, and then they hand it to somebody who needs it, either through direct delivery or these mass distribution points. So we can learn from other places and other direct service organizations on how to solve the problems that we have in journalism that might be similar. And the question is how do we begin to think about information as an asset, access to information as an issue, and try to begin solving for that with news products we create, short of putting up a sign on everyone's block that changes every week with critical information, right? So just an overview of the news harvest process. We identify information assets, we develop distribution channels, we outline production, built a technical workflow, and then we began these harvests and promoted distribution channels, and we are always iterating. So this is more of like a typical product workflow, right? A design thinking workflow, if you're familiar with the methodology. Where we're building something, we're putting it out there, we're seeing what's working, and we're adjusting to see how we can improve it. So we have our sourcing that's basically happening. We are sourcing news from probably more than 200 places at this point. We have a directory and Airtable that when we got started with our information ecosystem assessment, we just basically did a survey of every single information producer or distributor in the community. A lot of that is Facebook pages, a lot of that is Facebook groups, but it's a variety of different Facebook groups, right? It's the nail salon, it's the parks department, it's the animal welfare group. And these are the ways for us to tap into what is happening in each of these communities and amplify what they want to happen, what they're discussing, and share that with others. So direct distribution is key, right? That's what we're trying to do. So we focused on newsletters and our website. Our website is sort of a catch-all for everything we're producing and an opportunity to build out further on our brand. But every day we pull in news information from those sources and we pop them into a Google spreadsheet, which I'll show you momentarily. Press a couple buttons, and then we have this newsletter that goes out to now about 350 people in the community. And over the course of the next year, our goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers. So one of the things, you get your sources, you think about distribution, and you got to outline the workflow. So this is a high-level overview of what goes on in about 2 hours every day in Bloomfield. We have our sources, which again, we're continuously looking at, trying to improve. There's me, I put stuff into Google, it gets picked up by Zapier, and then gets distributed across MailChimp, WordPress. Gmail plays a role in here, which I can touch on, Twitter, Instagram, and then I'm personally currently doing our SMS channel, which is specifically focused on food distributions, like letting people know, hey, there's going to be a food distribution, on Wednesday that was not otherwise planned. So from me to Google Sheets is the first step of the daily workflow. This is what it looks like in our Google Sheet when the newsletter gets done. What I do is I review all of those sources of information. I pull links and add headlines that I think offer the highest news value possible. My goal in the newsletter is not for people to actually click into the link. It's for them to be able to consume it and understand what happened in their community that day. There's other things you can do in Google Spreadsheets that we're not currently doing that might make this all easier. But right now, what this looks like is we would then select all of the local news cells and paste them into a new sheet, into a different sheet in the Google Sheet. Zapier picks that up, so we're not messing with stuff that's being monitored by a computer to do something with. We put it into there, and then it gets pulled and distributed across all those channels. This is what that looks like. So Zapier connects different software to bring inputs in Google Sheets to all of these different places we're sending these things. So that's what, hence the moving the news to a new Google Sheet, because you don't want to mess with what is happening when Zapier is monitoring something. So just to like point out the workflow for some of these things, if you see an asterisk on something, that means there's a human action that has to happen at the ends to get it done. From Google Sheets, we publish each individual news as a news item, rather each individual news item as its own post in WordPress. So that requires us to then go in and just select 18 posts and publish them. The second line down is you're seeing the daily bulletin, that newsletter being created as a WordPress post. All of the news we're putting into the Google Sheet gets compiled together by Zapier. We have some HTML formatting and other things that we put in basically a template, and then Zapier places those things in their appropriate positions. Publishing the daily bulletin on WordPress, similarly publishing the daily bulletin on MailChimp, as you saw a couple of screenshots ago, pushing content to Twitter, and then pushing content to Instagram through HTML/CSS to image, which is an app that basically allows you to take some HTML, CSS, and then insert text to auto-generate graphics. We've been playing around with that this week, and I think that there's a lot of different opportunities to explore there. I don't know if that is the best way to get news to Instagram, but it's a start, and we're going to see where that takes us. Back to iteration. One of the things, that the final step of this whole process, I wanted to add like a layer to this and say we're also doing Spanish language translation right now in the SMS channel for food distributions. That's really just Google Translate and my, limited experience with Spanish. But what we want to do is build that out, move the Spanish language translation to become a fundamental part of our workflow so that we can begin to offer all of these services in Spanish as well. Obviously, it's not a replacement for a Spanish speaker publishing this news, but we think that there is an opportunity to begin raising the floor for information equity in the community in this way. Next up, we want to add workflows that source information back to us from the people we're connecting with directly. So here we're beginning to build that feedback loop from these distribution channels. This is, again, the next step here. This maybe is next year. This maybe is the year after for some of these things. But we want to begin to build a community list of community sources so we can ping them once a week and say, hey, what's happening? What's going on in the community? There's no reason that they have to go post it on Facebook for us to find out and then share elsewhere. So it's an opportunity to say, we're building a product based on listening to people. And then what we're going to be doing is in the distribution process, build new habits, new engagement habits that allow people to get more involved, get more involved in sharing news more frequently, and maybe even producing news. So eventually tying all this into a production arm, a community-run production arm where we're going to be training people. We're actually starting hopefully next semester with Bloomfield College. We've been in preliminary talks with them to work with their journalism students to basically say, hey, these are the news and information needs we're identifying. This is what we're hearing during our daily news harvest. Let's assign someone to develop that story a little bit further. So that's really a broad overview. I don't want to take too much time in the nitty gritty. I'm happy to talk about our information ecosystem assessment process, how we're promoting our news products, Zapier and automation, which I know might be like a complex area we discuss, and any of these other sort of things I have listed here on the screen.
Simon, before we get into questions deeply, I wonder if you could just share a little bit more about the Bloomfield Information Project and where it came from, and just tell folks like sort of where you're coming from. And then we do have a few questions in the comments that we'll get to.
Great, absolutely. So the Bloomfield Information Project is the public service journalism lab for the Community Information Cooperative. We got launched in March, right alongside the pandemic. And we were going to be our very first info district organizing campaign. Info districts is one of the things we work on. They are a model for publicly funding local news using special improvement districts, similar to the way we fund libraries, sanitation departments, airports, hospitals. Business improvement districts are the common variety. So we launched our first organizing campaign here in Bloomfield to figure out how we go from 0 to 60 in terms of launching a publicly run, publicly funded local news organization. So we got started in March, and since then have basically pivoted to thinking more explicitly about service providing and building a local news outlet here that can serve this community and the greater Bloomfield area. So yeah, I think that might cover it, Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so here's how we do this. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. The first one that I saw was, I'll just off the top, Kimmy Way wants to know who built the Zapier template and wants to know a little bit more about that. And then John Wilpers and Aaron also have questions that we'll get to after that.
Sure. So the Zapier templates were all built by me. I've been working in technology-ish for a couple of years, as well as like journalism. So Zapier has a lot of great sort of introductory lessons and frameworks and examples you could use to understand conceptually how it all works, and then dig a little deeper to see how you can begin creating rules or delays in your process, right? To say, don't post all 10 of these tweets at once, or other sorts of opportunities. I think that I would say like the Instagram one is probably the one I have the hardest time with, because it's a little bit, it's in beta and it's like, it's experimental. But all those apps were built by me, and I'm actually gonna do my best to get, Zapier has this new feature where you can share Zaps. So I'm gonna do my best to get links to all of the Zaps that I have and share them with y'all too.
Awesome. Yeah, so I just also wanted to point out, I just posted in the chat, but if anybody wants to ask their question out loud, just simply let me know and I'll unmute you and let you ask. But where we had one up here from John, or I'm sorry, from Aaron, who wants to know at the end about the costs associated with this process.
Yeah, we pay, I think $54 a month for Zapier. That I would say at the end of a month, it's probably about $150 we're paying across all the different platforms we're using, or would be using if we were paying full price for stuff like MailChimp. Our Zapier costs are probably going to double as we continue growing and thinking about how we're providing news products. So I think anywhere from $100 to $150 a month is probably what you'd spend if this was like fully flushed out.
I think, and Zapier has nonprofit rates too, right?
Yeah, I think they have a nonprofit rate. Absolutely.
Okay.
So along with that cost, then Simon, what about like how much time per day?
After building it, I had a lot of very frustrating days at the beginning trying to figure out how to use Zapier to tell people what the percentage rate change in COVID cases in our community was, because our publishing was the only place that people could receive every daily updates in the community about COVID. So I had a lot of very frustrating days trying to figure out how to make it work. Now it takes about 2 hours a day max. In setup, probably a day's work. If you feel comfortable with the stuff and have a list in front of you about what you need to build. Because I just want to talk a little bit about the workflow if it's useful. We have to build all of those distribution channels. So what does the template look on WordPress? What's the featured image? Let's create that. What's the template look on for the daily bulletin? We have to like write that, design that MailChimp, pull the template, figure out where things need to go. So there is definitely some organizational stuff happening. But once you have that distribution layer set up, really all that's left is the daily process and the promotion.
On the flip side of that, do you see any revenue opportunities? And if you wouldn't mind discussing those for John.
Sure. Well, I think the newsletter is typically the go-to opportunity. Is just is an ad. You can absolutely place like one of those links that we shared in the newsletter. Those could absolutely be an ad. We're not going to be doing that. I have moral quandaries about advertising. So until I resolve them, or until it makes sense, we're not going to be doing advertising. But I think sponsorship is a great opportunity. If you think about the benefit you are providing the community, it's not about it's in and of its sort of, it's so public service oriented, because what you're doing is you're basically like making sure people have the chance to get involved, right? Like you're basically saying, look, all of this shit is happening in town. No one knows about it. Everyone says, I didn't know that was happening in my community. I wish I had known. And you're solving for that problem. So that could be hospital sponsorship. That's your local business improvement district. That's your local chamber of commerce. Those are your schools. Those are, I think that there are more sponsorship opportunities than ad opportunities in something like this. And obviously members and donors. Right now we're having our member drive, our very first founding sustainer drive. So go to bloomfieldinfo.org to donate. /give. I forgot the /give. But I think that those are the two things that I'd look at: sponsorship and member donors.
Okay, I'm going to group the next two, one from Thomas and one from Carrie here. Thomas wants to know a little bit more about the initial step, the human aspect of you scouring 200 sources and putting them into Google Sheets.
Yeah.
Carrie wants to know, how do you determine what not to use on a daily basis? You have news parameters. And then one more, Ryan says you're curating headlines and possibly using other publishers' headlines. Did you ask permission to link or republish them? So talk about the gathering process in general and how you think about that. And if I mischaracterized anybody's question, just let me know and I'll correct in the chat next time.
I'm just going to answer that last question first, which is I haven't asked anybody for permission to share their content on the internet. We never. So yeah, I haven't done that. And if we are republishing a headline sort of word for word, it's rare, and that means they did a good job with the headline. So then as it relates to gathering, I mean, we're using our process is I open up CrowdTangle and I open up Google Sheets. And I scroll back 24 hours on CrowdTangle and I start scrolling and I see what's happening in the community. We share stuff. Our goal is to share stuff that's useful, practical. We don't share crime. We typically don't share stories about crime or any sort of like police stuff. By that, I mean, like, we won't share police blotters. We won't share write-ups where there are mugshots. We won't always share what we hear from the police because that might not be true. We are focused on providing information that we know is honest, like useful and accessible to people. So, but we will share the police is doing a community event, right? They're doing a bike ride this Sunday. That'll be in there. There was a police involved shooting yesterday. Like, we'll include that. It's basically, so we're looking for is stuff that, like news you can use. Like, what can I do something with this? I think about, like, will you talk to your spouse at home or your friends about this? Those are the sorts of things that I think about when we're looking for news. There's also one of the things we heard in our initial conversation, that same one where the news harvest came up as a question. Rather as an idea to solve for an information equity need, where people said, like, I want a reason to get out of my house. Like, I want a reason to be involved, and I want to understand why my involvement should matter. So we're a long way away from building that sort of like belonging as a news organization, but we're starting with like just like laying a base layer of like, let's get people involved, let's get people informed. So we review CrowdTangle, 200 sources or 200 sources we have in CrowdTangle, for example. And then they're not all publishing. So I go through the local news feed on behalf of people, and I pull the stuff that's useful and I bring it to them. Because most of it is like I don't think we have to convince anyone here how bad Facebook is for people and the environment. So like the ability to solve that problem for people, I think is really important. So that's what I mean when I say gathering. I basically sit there and I go through CrowdTangle, I go through our RSS feed. I'll go to a handful of websites that don't click into those, which is the Tap Into network in New Jersey. Their RSS feed isn't great. The patches, sometimes I'll have to check a patch directly. Montclair Local is a local news organization that doesn't have an RSS feed. So I'm just naming websites I go to too. I go to the county website for COVID to deliver news, the latest case counts now that they're rising again in New Jersey, and Essex County leads the state. So I basically wake up and read the news myself, review all the news myself, and then hand that over to everybody who needs it.
And just to reiterate here on behalf of Adam, you haven't gotten any pushback yet from local publishers or anything like that. I know there were some discussions about aggregation and I know you're not selling any ads on that now, but Adam said that he did run into that, and that's what's kept him from selling sponsorships or ads. Have you experienced any of that?
So I think that our math is about 50%, more than 50% of what we share isn't actually links to publishers' content. More than 50% is like community posts. Posts on the local Facebook group by local people about town. No one said anything to me about me resharing their news, no.
Okay, cool. And that's the last one on that. Carrie had a little clarification about, she said you mentioned every Zap is a WordPress post, but not clickable from your newsletter or post, correct? Is it just living somewhere on your site? Just clarify the terminology there as well.
Yeah, totally. I'm actually going to share my screen for, on that question because it might be useful. So every Zap gets pulled in as a post on WordPress. It's aggregation. You've seen this elsewhere. But
and then when you click the link, that's not linked at the top though, right? You said
that is not linked at the top. No.
Okay, but the source is there. Okay.
The source is there, and you click to go view it. And then in our newsletter, this is what it looks like, which is this, and then this goes to the source again too. Which is again the convenience of Zapier, is because I'm basically taking the title and the source and the link to it, and I'm basically distributing it across multiple platforms at once.
Gotcha. Okay, moving back up. Sorry, it auto scrolled me down here. I apologize. Here we go. Yes, CrowdTangle is what you use. Adam mentioned that he sources from Facebook, uses an RSS converter, and uses Feedly and Review. Let's see. And are there any alternatives that you know to Sheets, to Google Sheets, or do you feel like Sheets is the best one to use?
I mean, my guess is that Sheets would be the best one to use. It's just so accessible and it plugs into so many things.
Yeah. Do you use Google Alerts for keywords like Bloomfield? Do you use Google Alerts at all?
No, I don't. I should, and I should expand our listening channels in general.
What about verification? You're sourcing a lot of things from social media. What is your verification process like, and how do you make sure that you're not just recreating your own custom version of Facebook's misinformation machine?
Oh man, if only I were. If only I'd probably be making more money. But I had the pleasure of taking first drafts verification course when I was at CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. I highly recommend that as a foundation for how to explore content on the internet. We share, I'm trying to think of an example where further verification should, so like if we'll see an example is like someone posts, hey, 6 points opened on, like a new bar opened in town on Monday, like we're just gonna go to that bar's Facebook page also, or go to their website, or give them a call if we have a reason to question it. I can also look back and look at that person's profile, see who they are in the community. Are they the owner of the bar? Do they work with the downtown and business improvement district? Are they a source that would be trustworthy for this information? You know, we're not, I think that it's important to recognize that even if something, even if the sort of information we're sharing, even if something in it, and I'm not trying to downplay the importance of verification, but I'm trying to say that even if something in it were not accurate, it wouldn't probably have that big of a detrimental effect on people, because it's not who did or did not win the election. It's like, is the Black-owned ice cream shop going to be open tomorrow, right? Just to add some context to the question of verification.
And then what kind of results are you seeing? John wants to know how much engagement, how many return visitors, how long are visits, how many have become members?
Yeah. So we don't drive people to our website primarily, right? Our primary news product is this newsletter. Our primary news products in general are distributed. We do a little bit of reporting. We do basically a large piece, like a large investigative piece every quarter. This was our first quarter doing that. We got, 1,000 or 1,000 to, I think, 1,100 people to read the story, sign up for our news bulletin. We're in our first fundraising season. So I can't tell you how many of our subscribers are going to become donors, but right now we have 350 subscribers. Our goal is to convert 100 community members into donors and raise $11,500 in the process, which will, because we are part of Newsmatch, will mean that it gets doubled because we're part of the Institute for Nonprofit News. So that's our goal. And was it John who asked the question? Yeah, John, I look forward to you to being able to answer that question for you in a year with some real numbers. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the questions you ask are fascinating because return visitor, I know, like, I'm super aware that those are these metrics drive newsrooms and news organizations. These are not metrics that have driven ours yet. So I'm interested to see if that does come, or what kind of metrics do you develop for us.
Well, that actually leads right into Sean's question. How do the analytics that you see inform your posting and your selection, if at all? And what do you use to make those decisions?
Yeah, so right now our analytics do not inform the content we choose to post and not to post. On a day, you get what you get in a lot of ways, and we give people what we can from that day. I take, again, a lot of learning from, I know it's totally like not the same thing in Gravity, but from food pantries, right? Like we've been participating in food distributions since May, weekly, most weeks. And some days, like some weeks, there's not a lot to give, and it's like the worst feeling in the world. And but they still give it anyway. So there are some days where there's only 3 pieces of local news worth sharing, and there are some days where there are 18, and we have stuff on the cutting room floor that we get to put in on a slow day. Yeah.
Britt wants to know what kind of challenges you've come up against when it comes to engagement, and how are you solving for them, or how are you addressing them?
Our largest engagement challenge right now is getting people to, so this is the question. I think that our news harvest and our digital news distribution, I don't see any, like, we don't really have any goals there. Our engagement goals are more relationship building. So we have a new information needs survey that we have currently running. We're working on developing community programs. We're going to pilot 3 different kinds of community programs next spring, to try to figure out how we can build a group of interested, trained, vested individuals to begin growing this further. So our biggest engagement challenge really is, like, I need 20 people who want to, like, find out more and be involved in building an organization. Whereas, like, the larger community engagement challenges are not something we're facing yet, which maybe is what the question was about, but maybe not.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to bring Adam Avenir into this conversation. Adam's been in the chat talking about some of the alternative methods to Sheets, and I wonder if he wouldn't mind unmuting himself now and just tell the group a little bit about what you found and what works for you.
Yeah, I mean, I could walk you through the process that I love this, Simon. Thank you so much for sharing. I DM'd you on Twitter because I really want to sync up and talk more about this, because I think so. We probably started. I built something about a little over a year and a half ago. We got about 1,000 subscribers to it locally. I'll just walk you. I built the process. I am not a maintainer. I have a background in development and journalism and community organizing and just a bunch of different things. And I'm kind of a geek on seeing things in my community that need to be done and like, let's make something happen. So when I built this, I was like, I know that I could do it, but I don't have the time and ability to do it. My wife and I own a alt newspaper locally, and that does have a subscriber level through Patreon that's sufficient for me to pay somebody about $1,000 a month to run the newsletter now that I've built a process. So I built a process that I'll just like run through it actually on my computer here, because I think it I think it would be, it's a more, so I built it with the intent of it being super simple for somebody else to be able to maintain, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to do that. Can you see my screen? Is that,
no,
did I do it?
Are you trying to share your screen right now? You should be.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Simon, are you involved in any way with community access television? Sarah wants to know if you've had any relationships with them.
No, I have not.
Okay. Kate Maxwell wants to know, when it comes to engagement and metrics, do you have a sense of who your current subscribers are at all? And what parts of the community are you reaching? And are you taking any specific steps to sort of promote the products, given that it's so new?
Yeah, we are not reaching who I want to serve with our newsletter. We're reaching mostly white folks, mostly folks who are more affluent, who are probably already engaged on digital channels in the community, specifically Facebook. So that is absolutely a challenge that I think that we need to quickly overcome. In terms of distribution, that's it's being bootstrapped and having to pivot a lot during COVID has led me not to execute as fully as I'd like on certain things, like a marketing campaign, for example. So we are just, it's our fundraising season. So we're now going to be doing, have impetus to go out, hang flyers, put door hangers on people's doors in parts of town, do more outreach to the people who we currently serve with the food and mask distributions, to have them sign up for different news products. Our SMS product is specifically intended to serve a different segment of the population. So that's what we're thinking basically about is, so we have all this distribution mechanism for all of these different platforms, and we can begin to think about how we layer community onto these platforms and distribution to different communities using these spaces. So like, there's no reason we shouldn't have a single daily bulletin, which is like a daily bulletin, and then like another newsletter for people who are specifically focused on education issues or food access issues or housing equity, or et cetera. So I think that, we need to build more on that for sure.
Alrighty. One more question here from Aaron. Do you not integrate photos because it doesn't work well with the template, or is that a style choice, or is that copyright issues? What's the?
Those are all great points for why I don't integrate photos. It's harder. It doesn't fit into the template. There's not content. There's not always good photographic content in community and local communities. It's the reason why BloomfieldInfo.org is so bare also, because it's hard to find a featured image for every single post. So again, that's where we come up with the templates. So if you do end up sharing one of those posts on social, you'll see a featured image does pop up. We have some ways to add visual stuff and stuff gets shared, but for the most part, people are not engaging with us in places where multimedia content is expected or something.
So Kimmy says that's why what is there regarding the photos? Kimmy, do you want to specify?
Yeah, you were just talking about why you don't use photos, and you said something about that's why that is there. But I didn't get that.
Oh, I'm not sure where I said that, but so I don't know anything else that you might have heard about from the photos is really all that you might really needed to have heard. We just don't use it because it is inconvenient for us in our workflow at the moment, and there's a lack of local multimedia being produced that we have direct access to right away on a given day. So one of the many reasons someone mentioned not to use photos.
I see Adam was able to restart Zoom. We're ready for you now? You want to show us a little bit what you got there?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna try and share my screen. There we go.
I'll let you know when I can see it. There we go. Now we can see it. Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to show this really, really quick. So there's a bunch of ways that we get things RSS wise. Like I've made a couple scrapers myself. But then this is the easiest thing to grab things from social media. So fetchrss.com, you can see just tons and tons of Facebook pages that we've added here. And then those get added into Feedly. So then Feedly, we've got different categories of things: culture and life, government and orgs, media, elections, politics, COVID-19, et cetera. We then, what happens is that as we go through it, you can see like there's like a little save to board thing where my mouse is. Can you see that? So I can take an individual article and add it to a board that's like this Tracy's Daily board, right? So then in review, that'll show up right here in this little queue on the side. Right, so I've got this inbox on review, I mean, our newsletter, we then just like as we're working on it, I don't want to mess up Eric as he's working on this right now. So I think this is actually today's, but I can take this and drag it over here, and then can rename, I have a Zapier thing that goes and takes stuff from Feedly and puts it into review. That's a pretty simple little step. And then I always have it say original title because we rewrite all the titles to add additional information. Yeah, that's it. So that's like the simplest possible. I think there's actually a way to go directly in from Feedly in one of these source things. Oh yeah. So you can. It's just that I wanted to do some extra stuff on that in Zapier to really flag it as original title so that I could see what was different in adding that stuff. But that's the core of the process that we use, but just wanted to show that as like trying to make it like as as I love the spreadsheet thing because of the fact that I love the level of control that you've got there, Simon. So, and then your output is awesome. But yeah, I just wanted to throw this as a even like simpler way to get started with some of this stuff.
Awesome.
What I really like about that is something I think about is like there's still a lack of convenience to what I'm doing that could be with a better UI, like what you just showed through review. I'm familiar with review. I knew that they had some sort of Zapier thing. I just didn't know what it was, and I didn't have the bandwidth to like think about how to implement it. How if we moved to review, that would work. But I like the idea of what you showed with like adding something to the board. That's actively what we're thinking about with future iterations of this. I think that there's absolutely an opportunity to actually build a user interface for this task that's like super simple and straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of would like to build something myself, but I've got a lot of projects.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Adam. I'm going to remove you there and put you back on mute. We have one or two more questions, and we have 15 minutes left. And before we do end, I do want you to screen share again, Simon, and just show Zapier, because I think we've talked a lot about Zapier and what it is, but it's really fascinating. And I was hoping you maybe show us behind the scenes here. What does your newsletter compiler, or what does that in between process actually look like, especially for those of us who don't have coding experience, and maybe a little bit intimidated by the idea of automating this stuff.
Absolutely.
And then also Kimmy Way wants to know, who do you hand off the selected news items to do the rest? Who on the team there?
So it's all me. I wear many hats. But the ideal is that one day we'll be able to actually we build an actual editorial process on top of this, where every day or every week we see stuff happening, and then we could share it with a community member who's trained, who recruited and trained to produce news. So that's the ideal there. So let's take a look at. So this is this is what Zapier. Oh, am I sharing my screen? Yeah, I am. This is what Zapier. This is what Zapier looks like. I have a couple of different folders for different tasks that are happening. We have some. I don't know how I define the workflow managers. For here, if somebody submits a contact form, I get a bump in Slack. Resource publishers, we have a layer of publishing that we use Zapier for to publish press releases we receive, and public meeting transcriptions that we produce. So this is where those resource publishers live. And then this is daily news production. So at a basic level, I'm going to click in.
So each one of those, so just to back up, so each one of those little toggles that you have, each one of those is a set of instructions that Zapier's given to perform a task, right?
That's right. Thank you for that, John. So in this case, this is a Zap. It has rules, which are a trigger rather when new spreadsheet row is created in a particular drive. I can select the drive, I can confirm the data, and then I can create a draft in WordPress where you see these source URL, source embed, get pulled from Google Sheets, placed in this template that I've created, which I use for each of our newsfeed items on bloomfieldinfo.org. You can give it a status, you can give it a post date, you can select the excerpt, you could determine comment status, categories, you can tag it, and it automatically picks it up and places it, in this case, publishes it, or puts it in the pending review folder on WordPress for me to then publish. As it relates to the newsletter, which I think might be a little bit more relevant, let's look at this. So the newsletter is a template, and in that template, there's a code block. And so it's basically like I've designed it all, and I've taken a piece of it and I've cut it out. And that piece gets replaced every day by what looks like this. I'm just going to find it. I don't know if y'all can see that. Yeah, there's just like a whole bunch of HTML code. In each one of those HTML codes, there is that piece of news and information that I've placed there from each of these individual places. So in this case, this is a digest of all the top news I shared today. Zapier picks it up, puts it in a template for me, and then prepares it to be placed in the newsletter. That newsletter gets sent to me, a copy of that newsletter gets sent to me as an HTML, as basically HTML, and then I copy and paste that into MailChimp. I know, again, it's not the cleanest workflow. I think there are better opportunities here to auto-generate, press a button and have Zapier create a MailChimp draft and place your news into there, but that's a level that I haven't reached yet.
Thank you for that. Okay, we've got a couple more questions as a result of this here. One of them, Andrew wants to know if you've ever thought about a periodic physical newsletter with distribution to community orgs, like the food pantries that you're working with, in order to help reach folks with the highest info barriers. And there was seconded, several people in the chat also want to know about that.
100%. One of the things that I'm thinking about is using our relationship with food pantries to create newsletters specifically for people who get food aid. we haven't had enough bandwidth really to think about what print production looks like, because I think it's a completely underappreciated distribution methodology depending on who you're trying to reach. So absolutely, I think that that is something we want to do. We're just getting started, trying to get on our feet, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. The hardest thing is actually to say no to cool ideas. So definitely feel that FOMO, but hopefully we'll be able to begin experimenting with that further as we go forward.
And then aside from print, any other insights or thoughts you had about how to reach people who are not fully online for whatever reason?
My dear peer Madeline Bear at El Timpano said flyers fly recently to me, so I'm been putting up a lot of flyers. I think that if you can find an existing organization that is willing to work with you to have access to their community, that is an opportunity to say, hey, we're launching for example, our food SMS alerts. We just earlier today, we sent out an alert that the township is giving away frozen turkeys on November 22nd, and you should sign up. We should register before November 16th. So if we go to United Way and we say, hey, we have this service that we're using to help people meet this basic need, would you like to tell people about it? Like them to subscribe? Tell them to subscribe.
Oh, and it looks like I missed a question from Carrie. Sorry about that. Do you frame the daily posts differently on different platforms? Do you have a different tone for email, text, or any other platforms like that? Or is it the same for everyone?
Right now it's very templated. Last week we experimented with daily Facebook posts that might have had a little bit basically post a bulletin, give it a little bit more narrative than it typically is given. But honestly, my bandwidth is so limited that I'm making decisions to automate certain interactions that I would prefer to give a little more zhuzh to. So when we post to Instagram, we're just posting this raw piece of news. And that's why this week I've been looking at it and realizing it's not ideal, because what you really need is more narrative storytelling, slideshow, not just what is equivalent of Twitter posts on Instagram.
This is the Instagram posts you're talking about here, these?
Thank you.
These are all automated, right?
These are all automated.
Okay.
Not ideal.
Yeah. You want to talk about your relationship or your work that you've done with public libraries as places for people to connect? A couple of folks want to know about the library as a sort of central location for offline folks as well. And then after that, talk about the tools used for mass SMS.
Yeah. Libraries are great. Libraries are such important things. They often have their own newsletters. They often have their own news products that they're publishing. They convene so many people. I don't know, maybe not as much anymore because we are limited to our physical interactions, but the sewing club, ESL learners, people who are trying to get their immigration status, get to pass citizenship tests. They see everybody, and working with them would be a dream come true. In Bloomfield, we have some difficulty in the relationship with the library, which I think stems from the way politics and power is structured in our community. One day they will still become our partners, and I look forward to working with them. Libraries are great. Again, someone who has a list, somebody who can give you help with your programming. Maybe they can host your Eventbrite. Maybe they have a Zoom, etc. Maybe they could put your a little flyer or a bookmark in every book they hand out, right, with your news organization's information on it. So lots of opportunities with libraries for sure. And as relates to SMS, we've used public input and ground source this year. Public input is from Reach. Ground source is ground source. Right now, our food distribution list is on ground source because of ease of use. I used to work there. It's very straightforward as a platform to me. But when we started doing our mass distributions and putting a little text food or text comida, for news about food distributions, we were using Reach, and either platform is really
You said
great.
ground source, Reach, and what was the other one? Public.
It's Reach and ground source.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie's dropped the names in the chat.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And then do you have full access to CrowdTangle, or are you just using the Chrome extension? A public input is another one, by the way. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you,
Right.
Anne. Yes.
Reach and public input are two of the same, are one and the same. I have full access to CrowdTangle. I got full access to CrowdTangle when I was at the community journalism school, community graduate school of journalism, and have maintained it. But my understanding is that if you're a journalist, it's pretty easy. You just get yourself an account.
Journalists can have access to CrowdTangle, you said?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
I might be wrong.
Okay. We got about 5 minutes left. We've had plenty of questions. I think I've gotten to everyone's question. I'm going to go ahead and release the mute. If anybody has anything they just want to throw out there or ask Simon before we go, you should be able to unmute yourself now. We're going to see what kind of chaos this brings. I'll remove the spotlight. We'll get up back to gallery mode if you're not already there, and see if we can't, any stragglers who want to ask something. Go ahead now.
Simon, do you think that Matt Kaiser of What the Fuck Just Happened Today is using something similar?
I mean, Joe could probably answer that question.
Yes, no, he's not. He's using currentstatus.io, which is like a news aggregation dashboard, and then everything else we do there is manual.
The simplicity of design is 100% taken from Matt's work and Matt and Joe's work. But yeah, I think that I think that actually there is a organization that does this. Oh my God, I forget their name. We recently had a conversation. They work with Matt, they work with Vox, they work with like a lot of different organizations to help push content to push web content to newsletters. I'll remember their name and drop it and ask Joe and Stephanie to share it later, or maybe I'll add all these things we're talking about to resources at the end. But I saw a question come in from Doris. How and why did I decide what distribution channels to use? I'm focused on building as direct as relationships as possible with the people I'm serving. So that's why I'm not like on Facebook. And that's why I'm using SMS, newsletters. And again, the website at the moment is basically just like a catch-all for all the stuff we're doing, and there's going to be opportunities to build on top of that.
Okay. Yeah, we got 3 minutes left. Anybody wants to do any final ones? Otherwise, I think that ought to do it for today. I don't see anyone unmuting at the moment. Thank you, Simon. I really appreciate it. This has been very insightful. Thank you to everyone who showed up. We will be providing a recording of this as well as any links and interesting resources people posted in the chat. And then if Simon agrees, which I'm sure he will, we will also share the slides.
I already that we share the slide, so.
Oh, we already did? Okay, he has no choice in the matter then. We're doing it.
I still need to add resources to the last slide in there. So like someone hold me accountable to that if you need it.
Fantastic. All right, thanks folks, that'll do. We will see you later. Appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, bye everyone.